has been duly called, and that notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code 551. The board will now convene in closed session for an expulsion appeal hearing pursuant to Texas Government Code Chapter 551, including sections 551.0821 and 551.082 regarding student discipline and 551.074 consultation with the board's attorney. Following the expulsion appeal hearing, the board will convene in closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Chapter 551, including sections 551.071, consultation with board's attorney, and 551.072, real estate matters, 551.074, personnel matters, and 551.076, security device and security audits. So now we will move to our closed session for the hearing.
Very good.
Okay, it's 6:30, so we will reconvene with our regular meeting. Dr. Warren?
All right, everybody, please rise. And it's good to see everybody tonight, even though most of you have to be here. Thank you very much. All right, if you feel comfortable doing so, please pray with me. Our dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this day. Lord, thank you for a great school year. We appreciate all the efforts of our kids, of our staff, of our parents, and our families, and our community members. We just appreciate you allowing us to be part of such a great school district. Be with our board members tonight, Lord. Be with all of us. Bless this meeting and just see us all safely home. And Lord, above all things else, just please provide your love, your guidance, your wisdom, and your protection to our children. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, since Mr. McClure finally decided to show up for work today, let's let him lead our pledges today.
Was he late?
Oh, he was way late. We'll talk to you about that later.
My favorite subjects are math and PE. All right, join me in the pledges. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Mr. McClure.
You're welcome.
No, I don't have a present for you. Sorry.
Oh, man.
Maybe a watch? Do you have a watch? Oh, okay.
Give it to American Airlines.
Not you yet.
Sorry. Oh. Yeah. All right. Our next item is a consideration and possible action regarding the expulsion hearing filed by an NISD parent and or student pursuant to board policy FOD legal and the student code of conduct.
Madam President, I move that the board grant the relief requested and modify the disciplinary consequences issued at the campus level and the district level appeal decisions as follows. The student will be assigned to the district's DAEP for the remaining of the 90 days of the placement and with review according to DAEP guidelines.
I have a motion by Mr. Hastings and a second by Mr. Sluter. All those in favor? Carries 6-0.
Thank you, Board. And Board, Dr. Ferris will contact the mother tonight.
And I'd just like to say, Dr. Ferris, we do believe that you did exactly what the policy read, and we're not disputing anything you did. Thank you for your work. Okay, our next item is recognitions.
Mrs. Conklin.
If you and Mrs. Cobb can join us at the front. We are recognizing a new partner this evening. So we have representatives from Nuke's Eatery of Fort Worth franchise. If y'all can join us up at the front. There's 2 locations that Cyrus Park has. That is Presidio Town Crossing and Champion Center. And they do have plans to open more locations in the coming years. So they've already been working with us in many ways, celebrating Teacher Appreciation Week. They donated complimentary meal cards to give each teacher across the district an in-kind donation that was valued at nearly $30,000. So thank you so much to Nuke's Eatery of Fort Worth, and we are glad that you're joining us as a NISD partner in education.
Okay, next item is public participation. I believe there are none. Okay. And moving on to consent agenda.
Madam President,
Mr. Sluter.
I move to approve the consent agenda as submitted with the exception of item I, which I would like to pull off.
Okay. Have a second? Okay. I have a motion by Mr. Sluter and a second by Dr. Simpson to approve the consent agenda as submitted with the removal of item I. All those in favor? Carries. With removal of I, so
Okay, we're good.
10 votes.
Just making sure. Where's my attorney? I'm good? Okay.
Thank you, Board.
Okay. And we're going to go ahead and do that item I, which is Northwest ISD Aquatic Center Co-Serve Utility Easement. And we're going to vote on that item separately.
Yes, I will say that I'm abstaining because it may be a conflict with the company that I'm currently employed with.
Okay. So, because of that, we're going to vote on that one item. All those in favor?
Motion.
Motion? Oh, sorry.
Nope, you're good.
Sorry, got to have a motion first.
I move to approve item I, Northwest ISD Aquatic Center and Co-Serve Utility Easement.
Okay. Okay. I have a motion by Dr. Simpson, a second by Mr. Hastings. Now, all those in favor, please. 5-0 with one abstain.
Thank you, Board.
Okay, our next item is a discussion action item, naming of principal of O.A. Peterson Elementary School.
Board, I very proudly bring you the name of Miss Danielle Grimes as the new principal of O.A. Peterson Elementary.
Madam President,
Dr. Roush?
I motion to name Danielle Grimes as principal of O.A. Peterson Elementary School as recommended by the administration.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Roush, a second by Dr. Simpson. Is there any other discussion needed? All those in favor? Carries 6-0. Okay, item B, notice of public meetings to discuss budget and proposed tax rate. Dr. Warren?
Board, keeping with what we feel the law will mandate, correct, Mr. Graswich? We are, by the Texas Education Code, you are always required to send out a notice of public meeting to discuss the budget and proposed tax rate. That information on that began on page 103 in your packet. And of course, via the HB 3, we will be compressing our M&O tax rate by 7 cents down to 97. And John, I believe we're retaining the same INS rate at 45 cents.
Yep, that's correct. This notice is based on current law notices. There'll probably be some changes once the comptroller has a chance to go through, and that will be reflected in the August tax rate adoption. But this meets the requirements for right now.
Board, I'd recommend approval.
Madam President,
Dr. Roush?
I motion that to approve the notice of public meeting to discuss budget and the proposed tax rate as recommended by the administration.
Okay. Have a motion by Dr. Roush, a second by Mr. Hastings. Any further discussion, questions? All those in favor? Carries 6-0.
Thank you, Board.
Okay, item C, 2019-20 compensation plan. Dr. Warren?
Okay, Board, the information on the compensation plan recommendations began on page 107 in your packet. The actual recommendations, if you go through the proposals, begin on page 126. School board members, I will tell you this, that this is going to turn in just the understanding and being able to deal with the new finance plan is probably going to be one of the biggest challenges of our careers. It really is. We've never done this during my career, a total rewrite. I cannot, before Kimberly starts in on the recommendations, I cannot tell you we could be more proud of Dr. Cayley, Mr. Grasswich, Mr. Carter, Dr. Thornell, Dr. Griffith, everybody who has been involved in this discussion of what the compensation plan needs to look like as it applies to what we know of the law now, which is very little. We've received no guidance from TEA as of yet. Kim has been on the phone with many other school districts to try to gain some knowledge and gain some idea of what other people are doing. We've relied on TASA, we've relied on TASB, we've relied on the school coalition. So the work we're doing tonight and the recommendations we're doing tonight are based on the best scenarios we can see moving forward. Now, as Judy said before the meeting started, we're going to reserve the right and to bring anything back to you as a budget amendment, as a compensation plan amendment, if we feel we've not done it right, if we know that we truly have missed the mark as it applies to HB3. Again, we do it. We've studied it a lot to get to bring you these recommendations. But we do reserve the right, because this is all new ground, to make some alterations to this plan, to the entire moving forward as we get more information and understand more about House Bill 3. So with that, Dr. Cayley, please.
Thank you, Dr. Warren, President Kopp, and members of the board. Tonight we're presenting our compensation recommendations for the 1920 school year for your consideration and approval. The compensation plan does support Strategic Goal 2 to assist us in recruiting, retaining, and valuing our employees. This slide is what I presented to you back 2 weeks ago in our budget workshop. Every district in the state is working right now to get an estimate on the increase from HB3 and then try to come up with a plan to meet those salary requirements. Right now, this is our best estimate, and this is just the basic allotment increase. This does not take into account all of the funding changes of Chapter 48. So this is just the increase in the basic allotment with the number of students that we have next year. So we feel that the $7.4 million is probably a very high estimate. And as Brian and John work through the runs and the calculating the new funding estimates, we anticipate that there could be some changes, but that is the best case scenario we've got right now. So with that, with the increase, 75% of the 30% increase, which is about $5.5 million, needs to be a salary increase for classroom teachers, counselors, nurses, and librarians, giving a priority to teachers with more than 5 years of experience. And then 25% of the 30% increase may be used for salary increases to non-administrators. These are some questions that I brought forward to you a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to share some of the responses that we've gotten from TASB and TASBO. One of the first, and I've also included in your board packet, an article that TASB put out last week to try to provide more guidance with implementing HB3. But one of the first questions I had when I saw this is what positions are considered a teacher, an administrator, a counselor, and a nurse. And so the guidance that we have received is to use DEA legal definitions for, and you can see those here, for those 4 positions, and also to look at our PEIMS role IDs that classify our employees. So in order to be considered a classroom teacher, the teacher should teach an average of at least 4 hours a day in an academic or career and technology instructional setting. Counselor would have an SBEC certificate, provide full-time counseling and guidance. A nurse would be employed full-time. They would have to be practicing as a registered nurse. And a librarian also would hold that SBEC certificate and provide full-time library services. So for this proposal, we have divided our employees into 3 separate groups. This is group 1, our teachers, librarians, nurses, and counselors. One note, a classroom teacher, you can count the necessary time that they spend preparing for their job. So you can count planning periods, transition times towards that 4-hour requirement. Group 2 that's also included under House Bill 3 is our non-administrative staff. So this is including all of our hourly employees, our non-exempt staff, and our exempt staff who are not either in the teacher group and they're not a supervisor. And then group 3 is what is not included in the requirement, and that is our administrators. And there has been no official guidance from TEA on how to determine who is an administrator. So what we did is we placed all of our professional employees who hold a supervisory position in the administrative group. That included assistant principals and higher, assistant directors and higher. Another question is, was there any guidance on how to give a priority to our teachers with more than 5 years of experience? And the legislation really left this up to local districts to make decisions and gave a lot of flexibility. The intention is for teachers that have more than 5 years of experience to have a higher increase than other staff. Also, with the House Bill 3, they use the word compensation, and that can include insurance premiums. As we had brought you our insurance plan for next year, and we saw that many of those plans were going to have a higher premium, we had already talked about the possibility of increasing our district contribution. Right now we pay $325 a month, and we had already discussed proposing an increase of an additional $25 a month. So we can count that toward this salary requirement. We have just had to go through, and Kitty has taken all of our employees that are on the health plan and broken them into these 3 groups. So we can only count those employees on the health plan for the teacher group and also the non-administrative group toward the salary requirement. And the last question was, since there is no requirement for administrators, would we also propose a raise? In speaking with all of the surrounding districts, all of the districts around us are planning for a salary increase for all employee groups, including administrators. So those were the questions that we had going into this, and then here are some of our recommendations. We prepared 2 different scenarios for you to consider. This is the first salary proposal scenario, and this gives a 3% midpoint raise to our teachers, nurses, librarians, and counselors, and our non-administrative personnel. In order to differentiate the salary for teachers with more than 5 years of experience, we would propose a 4% midpoint raise for those teachers. For administrators that are not included under House Bill 3, we are proposing a 2% midpoint increase. The only difference with scenario 2 is that we would also offer the nurses, librarians, and counselors who have 6 or more years of experience a 4% raise. So those are the only 2 differences. We are proposing to increase the district contribution for insurance an additional $25 a month for all employees on the health plan, and you can see those estimates. For group 1, which was the teacher group, we can count about $350,000 of cost toward the salary requirement. Group 2 would be about $115,000. So if you were to add up the scenarios plus the district contribution for group 1, that's going to come out to about $4.3 million. When we first did the estimate, we were thinking it was going to be about $5.5 million. Again, we think that's high. You also have to take into account when you increase salaries, you also are going to be increasing your TRS contributions, your unemployment tax, your Medicare, your workers' comp. So there's some other fringes that have to be taken into consideration as well. And then for Group 2, it's about $1 million if we go with Scenario 1, which is still a little bit, about $800,000 short of where we had estimated. As Dr. Warren said, if we do fall short of the funding requirements, then what most districts are doing is they are already planning in August to come back with a budget amendment that may be an HB3 allocation, that they can kind of make that difference up if they do fall short. And that is definitely something that we can come back and do if needed.
Dr. Cayley, I have a question before you leave
Okay.
the insurance discussion.
Yes.
Now, the extra $25 in groups 1 and 2 would count with our HB3 funding, is that correct?
Correct.
So those that are not in the insurance would not get anything regarding the $25. So is that some incentive to get people to be on the insurance, or would that be better served put back in the so-called general fund and distributed among the employees?
We talked about that too. You know, that the employees that are not on the health plan would not realize any benefit. And you don't have to make that equitable and provide them the additional funds if they chose not to be on the insurance. But that was one thing that we talked about last week, is do we not do the district contribution and put that money back toward maybe a higher raise or something.
Okay.
So that is an option.
Thank you.
This is our substitute teacher pay rate. You can see our current rates there on the top line, divided by position, and what we are proposing for next year. We have not increased the daily rate for our substitute teachers since 2014, so it's about 5 years ago. And we're not only just competing with other school districts to try to keep a good substitute pool, but now we're really competing with the market in our area, with the opening of Buc-ee's, with Tanger Outlet Mall, Amazon. We have a lot of other opportunities for people to go get to work, and especially our aide position is just barely over minimum wage. So we really do feel like we need to raise those about $5 to $10 a day. The approximate cost would be $160,000, and that is just looking at our absentee rates for the 18-19 school year by these positions. And then these are our program staffing requests. Throughout the spring, we've reviewed the program staffing requests from each department and worked to prioritize the highest needs to bring forward for approval. And I've provided at your seats tonight a copy of those requests. When we initially started with our requests, they totaled $8.5 million, and they have been narrowed down to $4 million. So as you're looking, I know it's a very colorful spreadsheet, but that just really shows our work. Everything that is in gray that does have a balance in the far right-hand column are what we've included in the $4 million program increases. Everything that's highlighted in yellow or orange are things that we're not moving forward with.
So, Dr. Kelly, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously, if you look at the financial services, they requested 61 and they were given 119,000. So can you kind of explain those differences for me?
Yes. Last week, they did make a second request to add a second accountant. And so that's what that increase is for. That was actually last week that we did that.
Mr. Schluter, this board leads a central office that by all accounts, all the metrics that we looked at, all the comparisons that we've done around the state, is a very understaffed central office. Our folks do a lot we do a lot of work without the same number of staff compared to a lot of districts our size. In the financial services world, and Leanne can chime in on this, we are very much increasing the amount of load that we do, the check runs, well, everything that we do, payroll, everything that we do in there. Even reconciling the bank accounts has become a real chore to do that. So adding accountants, like I said, compared to the other districts, we are very, very light, especially just in that one area. So we thought it was a very thing, just because that is an area that you can really get behind the 8 ball quickly on if you don't do it right the first time. So that's why we just reprioritized and took away from some and gave to others.
Dr. Haley, I have a question. Just receiving this evening, I've not really had a chance to look over it well. Is this a segment that we could take off, or will that put the district in a bind getting everything set up for the July 1 date? I know we have a budget workshop next Monday. Is that something that would put us in a bind and to give the board a chance to review some of this? John?
You mean approving the compensation package?
Or just taking off the request staffing?
Program staffing, not to stop the whole compensation plan, because obviously, I understand and know we need to go forward with the HB3 part.
Sure.
Of the thing, but.
And you have to understand, a lot of this staff has already been hired. That's why we've been on this for, since right after Christmas, is because we really wanted to, especially the teaching positions, the growth positions, we wanted to try to get the very best.
Now, is that the growth budget part or just the program staffing?
The growth budget staff. And that's what we brought forward at the end of February. A lot of those have been hired. Those are for campus growth.
And that's really already been approved.
Yes. And then the program staffing, we have not hired very many off of that yet.
And I think that was the question. Could we go ahead and approve the compensation without the program staffing until the workshop on Monday evening?
Yes.
What did you say the orange line was for?
The orange and the yellow both. The orange kind of was the second priority level, but those have been cut. Those have been. So this last slide is just a summary. The growth and budget campus staffing, that was what was brought forward and approved back at the end of February. Our program staffing cost, the estimate that we have for the required compensation increase, the administrator salary increase of 2% midpoint, the district contribution increase of $25 a month for Group 3. Group 1 and 2 would be included with that HB3, and then the substitute pay increase. So tonight, our compensation plan is a discussion approval item in order to allow us to adopt a budget for the 1920 school year. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question, Dr. Cayley.
Yes.
Would you mention about the salaries of the administrative aides that we have, or aides in our classrooms? They don't classify as substitutes, right?
Correct, yes. Our aides in the classroom are paraprofessionals, so they would be included in that 3% midpoint increase for non-administrative staff.
Can you tell me how we rank in the area as far as substitute pay?
Yes, I can. Let's see. We right now are pretty aligned with Keller, and they pay a little bit more for a degreed teacher than we do. They pay about $3 more a day for a degreed teacher. Eagle Mountain Saginaw pays $5 more a day. Louisville pays $5 more a day. And then we are pretty much aligned with the other districts around us. For non-degreed, Carroll, Fort Worth, Grapevine, HEB, and Louisville all pay anywhere from like $5 to $10 more a day than we do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kaylee.
Well, I haven't had a lot of time to look at this either yet, but I'm very impressed with the fact that we brought it down from $8.5 million to $4 million, and I appreciate that hard work figuring out a way to do that.
A lot of work went into it, many meetings.
So as I'm thinking aloud, and that's always dangerous.
We've been doing a lot of that on this one, Ann.
I'm thinking about where we are looking at our fund balance and looking at our growth, and then looking at what the state is asking us to do. And I guess my wondering is, how did the legislation help us? I know it's been helpful to some degree for the next 2 years, but how does it help us really develop a sustainable budget over the next 5 years? I can't see how this can continue to go forward. So.
Well, I mean, Ann, that's the one thing that we are struggling right now on, just because we have had no guidance from the state to answer a lot of our questions, as Kim said, and as John and Brian and everybody else has struggled with over the last 2 to 3 weeks since the legislative session was over. Here's the big picture of this is, before House Bill 3 was approved, we knew we were a district that we were going to have a TRE. We knew, because of our growth and because of our needs, of both our staffing needs, mostly it was staffing needs just to keep up with the growth that we have and growing the programs the way our parents expect us to, that we, just like most of the fast growth districts in the state, would have to at least attempt a TRE to access more tax pennies for that. We were hoping with the advent of HB3 that need would go away. But now the one answer I'm fairly comfortable with telling you is we're still in a district that in need of a TRE to access more pennies. I don't think the way this has helped us, they did, and Deanne asked the question, and I believe Judy asked the question, they did, as Kim said, they raised the basic allotment per child. And so that will obviously help us. The problem, though, we have is they tried to tie school finance in with tax relief, with property tax relief. And so now that they have mandated the tax rate compression, we are actually gaining less from the state than we would have under the old law. The where it helps us right now, and maybe from what we've seen over the next 2 years of what we've seen now, it has zeroed out our recapture rate. That was the old Chapter 41 Robin Hood payment. That's where we gained our money. The excess funds that we had above the revenue we got for last year is because a $26 to $27 million recapture payment would significantly be reduced, if not zeroed out, at least for this next year, maybe next year, maybe. So what we know two things. We are a district that has to take a good hard look inward to change our district in a way that will meet the needs academically of our students and meet the needs of our revenue versus expenditures. So as John and Brian, as the crew in the finance office, they are always in budget process. We're actually not going to stop the budget process this year. The rest of us get a little bit of a break in the fall semester before before we start on the budget process again, right after Christmas. We are going to continue the budget process through the new school year in the fall, because not only I laid out a plan to the staff this morning that actually called for a 10-year plan rather than a 5-year plan, and just to make sure that we are efficient as we possibly can be, and it's something you've talked about all the time, man, is making sure that every one of our programs it has worth and is guiding us forward, and the programs that are not, we need to delete from our district. So that's number one, is that we have to change our spending patterns within the district to match the revenue that we are going to have in. But even in that, again, being a fast growth district, as many of the other fast growth districts in the state have already done, accessing more pennies, I think, is a must on our M&O side to be able to do that. Now, the rules have changed, and we're still working through that. John and Brian are studying that right now about when to call a TRE, what has to be done for a TRE, now a specialized audit that has to be conducted for at least 4 to 6 months before a TRE can be called. I mean, there's a lot of roadblocks now and hurdles that the state has put in between, and that was our right to do so. I have no answer for you tonight about what our future looks like. I can't give you any information because we don't know it yet. But as we progress through this next month, and I made the statement, it might be 4 to 5 months before we truly shake out everything HB3 has done for us and to us. Then we are going to make that attack plan to make sure, just what you're asking, that we are viable and can put the programs on the ground and support our teachers and support our staff the way we need to, and knowing we're still a district that's probably going to add $3 to $4 million every year just to have enough teachers to deal with the 1,200 babies that are going to come into the district right now. This is going to be, this first year, whether it's going to be old law or new law, was going to be a pretty good hit to our fund balance. We talked about that. I think that's important for our voters to see that we had such a significant hit, and because of your guidance and because of the work of your administrative staff and all the staff, we do have a very robust fund balance to be able to use that. We just don't use it, handily, this without the plan to move forward. So one of the most important things we will do is to come up with our budget vision and budget plan moving forward to make sure that we're not bringing you deficit budgets every year, and that has to be looking, number one, we have to look within, and number two, we have to probably ask permission from without to access more pennies.
And we weren't allowed to just go with a stipend for HB3 as opposed to a
They didn't want us to call it a stipend, but you can do a payment. You could do an allocation.
So an HB3 legislative allocation?
Yes.
So that wouldn't be then necessarily permanent?
It just kind of would make it more separate. And, we even looked at coming up with a longevity type plan for our teachers with 6 or more years of experience. But back to your concern, we did not want to bring anything forward that we felt like we could not possibly sustain over time.
Right.
I wondered if we couldn't use a stipend or an allotment, a legislative allotment, because the legislature can take it away.
Sure. Also.
I mean, they haven't guaranteed it except for 2 years, so it can go away. So that's my question, if other districts are looking at that, or is that possible? And it's not that I don't want it to stay.
Right.
I'm just thinking about what Dr. Warren has said about getting the budget balanced, and we're growing.
Well, this has become, the compensation package has become truly our challenge because, as John told you, I believe last week, our initial cost of the compensation package we had originally planned on was $2.9 million. So this is significantly over. Mm-hmm. And you cannot say one thing against paying our teachers more money or any of our staff more money. Everybody does a great job. They earn the money in which we can give them, if not more. We just try to convince the legislative body to give us the discretion to spend it where we needed to spend it and how we needed to spend it. That's what they would not go for. They wanted to take that upon themselves to mandate. And again, it all goes back to mandates. The requirement of us using fund balance would have been less had the spending, the compensation spending not been required of us. You bet.
John, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, go ahead. I just want to say that I too appreciate all the work that went into this, and I realize that you did decrease it quite a bit in your reviews. I do have a question on two or three of the line items of special education teachers for the $441,000 and then some other areas in the special ed teachers. Were those not included in the original growth budget?
No.
For the campus staffing?
They were not. Now, part of them, if you look at that line item, special ed teachers, it says 15 teachers, and if you go across, it's decreased down to 7 because we did move 8 of those to the growth budget.
Okay, so you did put,
Yes.
some of those are accounted for in the growth budget.
These are additional positions. A lot of them are coming from some grant funding.
Okay.
Positions that we've had in place that were on grant funding that the money is not going to be there next year.
Okay. Okay.
And same with the paraprofessionals.
Does that apply to the 30 special ed paraprofessionals as well?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. John, I have a question. In the past, our 5-year plan, we put in that we would try to do a 2% raise each year. Doing this higher percentage raise this year, what would that look like next year? Would we try to do that again? Will we go back to our 2%, or could we even do it at all? What is your thinking?
My opinion is that, first of all, we wouldn't do this again. And that would be because they're not going to increase the basic allotment again. This is not phased in over the biennium with $500 increase in the first half of the biennium and another $500 increase in the second half of the biennium. So there won't be any additional funding in the second half of the biennium. So we would go back to our more traditional raises, which have been centered around the rate of inflation, which is about, depending on how you measure it, 1.5% to 2.5%. And that's why we've always used 2% as a placeholder. At this point, to be honest, you mentioned next year's forecast. Everybody in Texas is scrambling to get this year's forecast, and no one is even hardly attempting to model next year's forecast. There's so much that's going to go into this. I may be the only person in the room who did this before. This is very similar. Actually, it's much worse, thanks to computers. Because you can get a lot more data than you can in the old days when you had to do it all by hand. But this is very much like when they rewrote the entire education code in 1985. And it took several years to sort that out, to be honest. And so Omar's just now coming out with his first model, and we haven't seen anything from TEA. I think they said their first summary of finances might be September-ish. And so one of the things that will have to be done is to reconstruct the financial models in order to do the forecasts going forward. So there's a certain great amount of unpredictability at this point as to the out years. But as Dr. Warren said, it was kind of a left-hand, right-hand thing. They gave you $1,000 on the basic allotment. That's great. They took away $500, though, per student by getting rid of the cost of education index. That's not great. They, reduced recapture. That's good. However, they cut the tax revenue and went to current values, which is really bad for us. And so there's a lot of pluses and minuses in that. And going back to 1985, the one thing that concerns me, quite frankly, is I'm not so certain, knowing what the LBB, the Legislative Budget Board, had to go through in modeling this for the state of Texas, as to whether or not the state of Texas really knows how much they're committed to spend. They've got a number, but I don't know if that number is going to hold up when push and shove and real data start coming together. And they may find themselves in a bit of a crunch in the second half of the biennium as well. And in 1985, the answer was called proration. Whoops, we ran short of money. You only get 85 cents on the dollar. So I don't know what's going to happen in the second half of the biennium, and that's why we just have to be flexible. There's also the kick-in of the 2.5% tax limitation and addition and compression that starts in 2021 as well. So that's a whole other factor that no one's even attempting to model at this point. So there's a lot of work to be done, as Dr. Warren said, in regard to getting the budget for 2021 started this fall rather than the more traditional cycle, because this is anything but a traditional cycle. And quite frankly, this is where a good fund balance comes in quite handy, because you don't find yourself suddenly scrambling. You can make more reasoned decisions because you have that cushion.
I'm just waiting to hear the motion.
Board, I recommend that we approve the compensation package tonight. Everybody will get started on the work on that. We will change as we need to change, either you initiating it or us initiating it. We'll bring you those recommendations. And we just have to grow together with this. I mean, we have to work on this together, both the challenge of integrating HB3, but really us in general. You know, you guide the vision, you guide the mission, and your involvement in just the total, just kind of stripping down everything that we do and building us up so that really our parents and our children should not know any different. We will know the difference internally, but our parents and our kids should not be able to notice the difference in what we do, because we're going to be running that efficiently to be able to do that. So I would recommend approval of the 1920 compensation proposal.
Madam President, I'll make the motion to approve the proposed compensation plan as recommended by the administration.
She said that with confidence, too. Good job, Ian.
Motion by Hatfield and a second by Mr. NISD. All those in favor?
Thank you, Board. Very good work, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, next item, Northwest ISD Aquatic Center guaranteed maximum price. Dr. Warren?
Board, after your guidance, I believe the last meeting of April, after your guidance, Tim led through the process of bids, and he is here to report his findings, and we have a recommendation for you based on, again, that scope that you allowed us to move forward with. Tim?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Warren. Board of Trustees, we got in front of you, again, like Dr. Warren said, from our last meeting, the guidance to go ahead and move forward with the bidding. So this PowerPoint's pretty much the same thing you've seen before. I'm just going to kind of flip through it to just remind you of the slides and get to the meat at the end of the presentation here. We received bid day activity. It actually set up really very close to what POG had estimated. They had really done a real good job with their contractors, their subcontract group, and getting their bids and estimates. So you can see there the budget estimate is on the right-hand side, and then the actual estimates that came in, or the actual bids that came in, and the GMP that is presented tonight is on the left-hand side. You have the same dollar amounts there at the beginning. Kind of see how that breaks down. The little over $3.4 million for the Texas Health Group that's associated with this and their commitment. That sports medicine, dry land, CTE training area that we had put a price tag on about 1.6. It stayed right there at about the same. Another piece we just kind of pulled out as we look at if there's things that were something we could sacrifice, and that would be the connection of the drive between Pike Middle School and this project. Of course, that roadway, last time you approved the construction moving forward with the new baseball, softball field house on the backside of Pike that will come in the drive right there next to the backside of the baseball and softball field house, or playing fields. So there's a portion of this that would connect that drive through, so it gives a back loop to those amenities to both facilities, the field house and the natatorium. So we just kind of isolated that out. We actually asked Pogue to bid that as a alternate, so we could look and see if that was something we wanted to do this time or not. We feel like for the value that price is, it's the right thing to do. And so ultimately we came in about $200,000, a little bit over $200,000 less than what we thought the estimate was going to be that we brought to you last time. So when you take the total project estimate and you reduce that by the Texas Health contribution, the $3.425726, that puts the remaining balance at $33,127.07. When you look at that and look at how did we get to that, well, we had in the original budget the $27.5. Of course, we talked about some of those construction cost escalators and drivers that we're seeing in the marketplace. We feel like that's the number that's really kind of pushed this project up. The addition of the practice pool to accommodate that fifth high school, to postpone having to build another $30 million facility sooner than what it would whenever we opened the fifth high school. We would be able to handle 5 high schools in this facility. So that's that addition of that practice pool. And then the addition of the athletic training area that would support basically every user group in that facility, the CTE group, the athletes, the students, the medical industry, as well as the training industry. And so you see that price there too. So the difference from the original budget you're looking at is $5.6 million. The 1.6, I just remind you that we do feel that is something on the athletic training area that we can get a contract with. When we sought that out, like we did the Texas Health piece, for them to come on board early and give an upfront lump sum payment in return for a contracted lease term, obviously Texas Health can't afford the almost $3.5 million. We could not find a training group that could afford that upfront lump sum payment. But we had multiple training groups that were interested in striking a deal that would ultimately get to that over the course of many years. So I feel like, and I stated that in one of the previous presentations, that we can achieve the payback on that 1.6 just through that lease contract with a training entity that comes in and shares this facility with us somewhere around the range of 15 years. And so that was just that piece I wanted to remind you of. Then ultimately where we would use those funds from are previous bonds. We're real close to being able to close out the 08 bond. There's just a little bit left in that, and we're getting real close to closing out the 12 bond too, which those are good things. We need to not really be operating in multiple bond programs. We've enjoyed savings almost in every bond program that we've had. I believe we'll have savings in this bond program. We've actually had them with the last presentation we gave you on Northwest High School. If you remember, we were about 1.8. I'm looking at Pogue, they're shaking their heads. About 1.8 million under that budget. The problem is we've started a lot of work from the 17 bond. We just haven't completed it to return those savings back to the bond. I think every project we've started will realize some amount of savings. So basically the ask there is, as we brought to you before, to bring some of those additional funds from previous bonds. Now that would still leave close to $3 million. With 2 projects not closed out yet. The Elementary 18 is not closed out, so we still have some money that may add to that savings column, as well as Middle School 6. We have some money that may add to that savings column. Those are just our guaranteed estimates that we know are in there without closing out the construction contracts, which we're in the process of doing right now with both of the contractors for each of those jobs. So as of today, if the money's moved and we do the facility as it's been presented, then you still have about $3 million, close to $3 million in previous bonds savings there. Happy to take any questions or go over anything. Representatives from Huckabee and Pogue are both here tonight as well. If you have any questions, Joel and Celine are also prepared if you have any questions on either of their programs.
Mr. McClure, I have a question for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
So the amount that you're requesting is 36 and some change, and the budgeted amount that you showed there was 33 million. So here again, we show the 36. So could you explain the differences? One, the equipment and other amenities?
Yeah, so the request amount is a 36. Now, you've got to realize that $3.5 million of that will be refunded to the account through the payments from Texas Health. And what they've said is they would pay one in this fiscal year and one in next fiscal year. So that $3,425,726, that's part of that 36.5, would refund back to our bond program. So we would need to fund it up front as part of this project. They would cut the checks and it would go back into, allocated back to the bond program where we use the funds from. Okay. The 1.6 is the cost associated with doing the dry land training. That is this training facility here. That gives us the dry land area. It also allows for a elite training program to come in here and set up a leasable space with us and provide other amenities outside of school hours and to our communities in this area. It also gives a space for the sports medicine group to be able to not only use the classroom space, but a dry land space when they're over in this facility looking towards a sports medicine degree. So that's what the 1.6 goes towards. And
what is that term? Go back to that. What is that term associated with medicine?
What's that?
Go back to the original slide that had the totals on there. Go back one more.
You mean this one? Or one more before that?
It was one.
This one.
This one.
Yeah.
What is that sports? What's that next word there?
The sports medicine, that should be a comma, CTE and dry line training area is what that area has been designated.
I don't think that's how you spell medicine, but I'm an
there's
engineer,
a typo.
not an English major.
Thank you for pointing that out. You heard me earlier during my pledge that math was my favorite subject. There's the reason, so my apologies on that one. We're gonna move on to the next slide. I think it's spelled right elsewhere.
Madam President, I move to approve the GMP in the amount of $36,546,433 and approve the use of the undesignated funds from previous capital bond programs in the amount of $5,620,707 to be added to the NISD Aquatic Center as recommended by the administration. And aside from that, I'm glad to have POG pushing this project ASAP.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Sluter and a second by Dr. Roush. Any other questions or comments?
I do have a question because I remember last time we forwarded it to this time to make the decision based on whether we wanted to throw in that extra 1.6 mil. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then also the drive-through area, correct?
Yes.
And so tonight, by doing this, we've approved both.
That's correct.
Just for clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I just have a comment, and mine is, after his explanation of school financing for the next several years, this scares me to death. That we're going to build a facility over there that we can't even put water in. Serious. I mean, you're starting to look at programs, and this scares me. I'm all for it. I want a pool as much as anybody does for the kids, but when you start talking about the unknown, it's scary. We start talking about a new elementary or middle school. The kids are there, and we got to provide those positions for 22 to 1. But a pool that may get shoved on the back burner. Yeah. And then we have a pool. It just really scares me at this point. Hopefully we can find some partners that will help the yearly cost on this, because without that, it's really going to be a drain on our district.
Yeah, we feel like we've done the due diligence on that, working with Joel as well as Huckabee, visiting with other school districts and their partnerships and the club teams and things that come in. This will be a facility that's ran almost 24/7, 365. It is not a very staffed facility. It doesn't take a lot of staff to run one. It takes about 3 people. We found some community partnerships with Texas Health. I believe we'll be back in the near future to bring you another partnership that helps offset those operational costs in the training side. I do think we'll reach something there. And then in addition, having a director that helps view this as a business model, not just a swim center. I mean, that's going to be important when we go to make that decision. I know that'll be led by Joel and his team. I think I've talked with Dr. Thornell and myself, as well as Dr. Warren, on making sure that's the right person that can know how to use the facility to create those offsets in our operational expenses. I think we're positioning ourselves very well with Texas Health. That's a huge one for years to come, because what we've gotten an agreement with them is basically we're tallying up the numbers, and once they reach their initial investment, then we're up for a re-op there. And so I think that's going to come a lot sooner than we expect. So you're right. It will be the most expensive building we run. It'll run, our initial estimates are somewhere between $800,000 to $1 million a year operationally. That's just water, electricity, utilities. Put that in comparison to a high school, high school runs about $500,000, $600,000, depending on how much use it's getting. So it's a little more than high school, a lot smaller footprint, a lot less salaries in it, but I think it does provide us a lot of opportunities to bring in community partners and bring in clubs to offset that cost, and I know that's going to be our goal so that we can bring that back and that doesn't become a headache or a burden to us, nor you as you make future financial decisions. You're welcome.
I think you told us this last time, but how long is the Texas Health commitment for that amount?
15 years.
So then after 15 years, they would have to re-up?
There's 15 years, but what we've said is because we don't really know what those day-to-day costs on electricity use and water use and all those things that we're putting in the clauses. Christy's been working very diligently with them to say that we're going to tally that until we reach their amount. So that could happen in year 5 and we re-up. That could happen in year 10. Our best guess, and at that point it becomes a lease, because there's a lease space there too as well, so you're paying a lease that they are up front. So at that point it becomes a renewable cost that we're not offsetting by the construction cost. That's a income at that point.
Anything else? Okay, we had a motion by Mr. Sluter and a second by Dr. Roush. All those in favor? Carries 6-0.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Board.
Yeah, we have to build it as part of the fund. So.
Yes.
Sure. All right, our next item is TASB Board Policy Update 112. Dr. Warren?
Board, since we only have great things to say about this last legislative session, Christy has an update actually from the session before that. This comes from the 85th legislative session. That's how current we are now with our policies, and TASB always does a good job. So Christy will go through the pertinent information, and this is a discussion item for your discussion for tonight. Christy, please.
All right, we've got a full-on policy party tonight. We're looking at 3 separate policy updates. The first one is TASB's Policy Update 112. Then we'll look at 2 local district updates. The first one that we'll look at, the local one, is as we transition from 6-week to 9-week grading periods, policies that need to be updated to reflect that. And we'll also look at policy updates as we implement the District of Innovation Plan. All right, so personnel policies. DCB local is being revised to clarify that term contracts are required only for positions that SBEC requires have certifications, plus any that the district has additional certification requirements for. DIA local is being updated to add sex to the non-discrimination statement. Currently the phrasing is gender. We don't discriminate by gender, but now it will say by gender or sex. And it also moves a provision about knowingly making false claims from DIA local to policy DH. The effect of that move is that it will make it clear that if an employee knowingly makes a false claim, that there can be employee discipline for that. DH local and DH exhibit are also updated. In DH local, we do have a clarification that an employee can be disciplined for knowingly making false claims or for refusing to participate in a district investigation. And this is really a carryover from the Me Too movement, wanting to be sure that claims that are made in good faith.
DH exhibit, we have 3 standards added to the Educator's Code of Ethics. Those have been added to the administrative rule, and so we are adding them to DH exhibit, which just parrots the Code of Ethics. Those 3 employees are prohibited from using district resources for personal gain, using controlled substances, prescription drugs, or toxic inhalants, and knowing sexual harassment of a colleague. We've also seen a move from one policy to the other, moving from DH now to a different section, that it is an offense if an employee assists another employee who was terminated because of an inappropriate relationship with a student, if they assist that employee in getting a job working with students at another school district. All right, business and support services. CHCQ and CV. CH and CV have a lot of additional changes that our local committee has recommended. So the TASB policy recommendation to CH just clarifies that the district may reject bids in accordance with state or federal law. Just kind of cleaning up the language there. And our policy committee recommended some additional changes. One, that contracts requiring board approval for unbudgeted purchases, that threshold would go up from $50,000 to $100,000. There's also a recommended provision for emergency purchases, and that's just in the case that we would have someone, run their car into a school building and we needed to hire a contractor immediately to get out there and fix it, that we wouldn't have to wait for a board meeting to have that purchase approved, that the superintendent could authorize that. And we also recommend updating the job titles of people who have authority to sign contracts just to reflect the current job titles of people in those positions. CQ local just adds some terms for electronic signatures on contracts. CV had a very limited change recommended by TASB, just adding a reference to policy CBB legal. And then our local committee recommended also changing the threshold from construction contracts requiring advertising, moving that from $50,000 to $100,000. And frankly, there probably aren't many contracts at all that even fall into that $50,000 to $100,000 window, as construction expenses tend to be well over that $100,000 threshold. Revenue facilities, TASB broke up one big fat policy, CCG, into 2 smaller ones, CCGA and CCGB. The terms remain the same. They just decided it would be better organized to have them under 2 different letters. All right, and student policies, FMA and FMG. FMA clarifies that school publications are under campus administrative control, which is something we've known, but we've just added some clarification there. And where we did have statements that you can appeal through FNG, those have been removed from this particular policy, and we just would refer people to FNG local, our normal grievance procedure for students. FNG adds provisions for grievances when a member of the public is ejected from campus, and it also extends the time to file grievance for certain complaints in response to TEA rules that have been implemented. All right, local governance, we have one, and it is short and sweet. In BGA local, they basically changed the font and some of the formatting to make it easier to read for people with disabilities, so that when computer programs are reading things out loud, it's just easier to access that way. Community and governmental relations. GF, we add provisions for grievances over ejections from campus to model those new rules from TEA, and extends the time to file grievances for certain complaints. And GKA local clarifies that authorized district officials can eject guests from campus or refuse them entry. Okay, so that's TASB's recommended local policy changes. Moving on then to local district update 29.01. As our calendar does move from 6-week grading periods to 9-week grading periods,
There are 2 policies that we need to update to be clear with that. So EIA local clarifies that report cards will be issued at the end of each grading period. Previously it said that report cards would be issued every 6 weeks. And then EIC, the recommended change here is to update the time when class rank is determined. Currently it's at the end of the 5th 6 weeks, and we recommend moving that to the end of the 3rd quarter. Now, of course, the board has directed administration to bring forward additional changes to EIC local, and we are still working through those. This change is just for the purpose of that 6 to 9 week transition, and we will be bringing EIC back to you at a later date.
Does everybody know what that issue is? That's the young lady that we heard for the thing that we're looking at that.
There were a couple, we actually looked at about 15 local policies and administrative regulations in regard to whether or not changes needed to be made for the 6 to 9 week move. There were several that administration just decided we didn't want to make. One of them was to extend the time that the district has to identify transfer students for GT services and for kindergarten acceleration. Administration felt strongly that we can continue serving those kids and meeting that 6-week deadline, and it was best to keep that deadline rather than take another 3 weeks just because the grading period is moved. And we also considered extending local deadlines on T-test appraisal. It was preferred to keep that at the 6-week mark because so many of the other T-test appraisal deadlines in statute and administrative rule are also on 6 weeks. So just for consistency, that we would all expect those deadlines to come at the 6-week point. Okay, District of Innovation. Dr. Thornell, if there's anything you want to add as we go through these, please feel free to speak up. Basically what we're doing here on the DOI policies is that under DOI, the district is exempt from several laws. And so once we are no longer bound by those laws, we kind of have a hole there. And so here with policy, we're trying to kind of backfill where that legal hole is so that we have some policy expectations for how we're going to go forward with that exemption. AF is just a new policy that TASB recommends we add, and all it says is that we have a DOI plan. That's a short and sweet one. Then under educator certification, you may recall that one of the DOI exemptions we have is that the district is exempt from hiring certified teachers. The intention was never to remove that from 2nd grade teachers, 3rd grade teachers, and from core subjects. And so what this does is it clarifies that the certification is not required for CTE, dual credit, and world languages only, that we would still expect certification in the remaining subjects and grade levels. DK local would also be updated to clarify that the superintendent can grant a request to hire an uncertified teacher in those 3 subject areas only. And it is current district administrative practice that when we hire someone who doesn't have a certification, that they receive a contract addendum that gives them 2 years to get that certification. If they don't have it at the end of the 2nd year, then that contract would not be renewed. Under DCA local, we are making some clarification on the exemption where probationary contracts, typically if you have a 5 of 8 teacher, a teacher's been teaching in the classroom for 5 of the last 8 years, you can only give them a probationary contract for 1 year. Under our exemption, we could keep an experienced teacher on a probationary contract for longer. And so kind of the backfilling we're doing here with policy is that an experienced teacher's probationary period could be extended at the superintendent's recommendation. Mentor teachers, HB3 threw us into a loop on this one. The exemption we have here is that mentor teachers are not required to have 3 years of experience under our exemption. Under HB3, the state is now providing funding for a mentor teaching program. And the new law does require 3 years of experience for mentor teachers. So we're in a conundrum there, and how do we keep the freedom and still keep the funding? And so what we have added in is a procedure where if a principal wants to appoint a mentor teacher
who has fewer than 3 years of experience, they make a formal request to Dr. Cayley and Dr. Griffin, and those would be reviewed based on the experience of the teacher as well as the funding impact. TEA has not yet obviously had a chance to draft the administrative rules for implementation of that mentor teacher funding, so we wanted to have something in policy that would provide for a review process as those rules are drafted so that we can, if it is appropriate underfunding and we wouldn't lose funding, we could still have mentor teachers with fewer than 3 years. EB local, our DOI exemption here is that we would be allowed to start school before that fourth Monday of August. All we've added here is just a statement that the district is exempt from that. Another DOI exemption are the statutory limitations on credit by exam, and under our DOI policy, we are exempt from those. We are keeping most of those in policy. There are a few changes recommended to make sure that we are serving our students best who do seek credit by exam. The first one is that under the law, students only have to make 80% on that criterion reference test to accelerate. Locally, we want to require 90% because we found that students who make 80%, maybe they do know enough to advance, but once they get into the next class, they don't really have the skills to be successful in that new class. And so by raising that threshold to 90%, we are more confident that those students who accelerate will be successful in the higher level as they move up a grade. Additionally, under statutes, there are 4 testing windows per year available to students when they can take a test to accelerate past a grade or subject level. And locally, we're recommending that in grades 1 through 8, we remove one of those testing windows, and it's that spring testing window from January to March. The reason for that is that by that point, kids who would be testing to skip a grade have already received instruction for half of that grade. And if they pass and can accelerate, there's not much left of the year for them to accelerate past. And so we think that would be more successful for our younger kiddos. Minimum days of attendance. So the district is exempt from the requirement that students have 90% attendance to receive credit. What we've added here is some backfill to provide some guidance for determining whether a student should receive credit for a course. And the factors would be their assignments, their tests, their projects, classroom activities, and other instructional activities, so that the teachers and administrators can really consider how that student is performing in the class and their mastery on something other than just a multiple choice test. On FO local, the exemption we have here is under the law, each campus designates one person as the campus behavior coordinator. We asked for an exemption on this just because it's simply not workable on our large campuses. Principals, assistant principals, counselors all have to work on the discipline of students, and designating one person only to handle that doesn't allow them to serve students appropriately. And so we just have an additional statement here that clarifies that the district is exempt from that requirement. We do have an exemption on the procedural requirements to remove or ban unwanted visitors. And so we are adding to GKA local just a statement that a district official shall refuse entry or eject a person from district property without warning or without written notice. It's a lot of policy. Any questions?
And you will see this again on the 24th for final approval. So if you do, as you work your way through these, just make sure that you provide Chrissy any and all questions, and she'll be happy to address those for you.
I have a question. I was just curious about the change from 6 weeks to 9 weeks.
Yes.
What's the rationale, or?
Okay, why we moved from 6 weeks to 9 weeks? Dr. Thornell, do you want to address that?
We've had lots of different discussions about that. Most of the proofs came from our own staff and faculty council and feedback on that. Wanting more time to assess it, they felt very crunched with trying to get the required number of summatives into that time. They actually something we've discussed the last couple of years, and finally, again, put it towards the faculty, and really had some lengthy discussion about it. Felt like it was a good thing. And they're working through the grading guidelines on the required number of formatives and summatives and adjust that. So, again, most of our teachers felt like it's positive.
For both elementary and secondary?
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. Have they looked at what impact that's going to have on some students that start the year out very slowly? And before with 6 weeks, they had 5 additional 6 weeks to recover. Now they will have 3 9 weeks to recover, and for most of those, the first 9 weeks, a semester's gone, or half a semester's gone. They lose the first semester, and I've seen that happen a lot.
One of the ways that was discussed is some of our highest failure rates are in the first 6 weeks, which the last 3 years because we've done it only 5 weeks. I think now that it's 8 or 9 weeks long, to get off to a good start on that, we're supposed to actually see the benefits of the not
But we changed this calendar and started earlier so they would have the 6 weeks at the beginning of the year.
How do we try to get the whole semester in before Christmas? And move it up a week.
Right. The recommendation to us was to only move it up a week. There was also an option to move it up 2 weeks, which would have been able to still complete the semester before the break.
2 weeks is not very popular with our constituents.
Well, I can understand that, but there was that option, and if that was a real concern of the teachers that they weren't getting enough time, that would have been an option for them to voice their approval of starting a little bit earlier and giving themselves the full 6 weeks at the beginning of the year. And you're right, the first 6 weeks are the ones, especially in the transition grades of 9th grade and 6th grade, where the kids are making those transitions from elementary and middle school. It's really tough on them.
Will there still be like progress reports? Like I think in the past we did the 3 week.
We get a progress report, which also ends up being eligibility at secondary level every 3 weeks.
Every 3 weeks.
The difference between that and a report card is that there's not necessarily a requirement of the number of assignments on those progress reports. It is a big change. Adam and his team have worked with that. Gus Noza and then Ab, as well as Dr. Harris, Dr. Griffith, getting feedback. Again, I'll leave you with it was a very positive thing for most of our faculty, just because of the time constraints that they feel like they've been under on the current grading policy.
It just seems interesting that we haven't really even begun the District of Innovation calendar, and then we're making major changes in grading without having first implemented the new calendar.
Is the DOI 1 year at a time? I mean, is this something that we could you could change next year?
You or us could change it at any time we want. From the state standpoint, it's at 5 years. We don't have to ask them for permission for our 5 years.
Okay.
We can choose it.
And if there are new laws that came out of the new legislative session that we wanted to be exempt from, the committee could reconvene and make additional recommendations.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Christy. Good job.
Okay. All right. We took care of the consent agenda, so we're moving to Board President's Report. We have SLI Conference June 20th through 22nd at Omni Hotel in Fort Worth, and TASA and TASB Convention September 20th through 22nd in Dallas. Registration for that opens June 18th. Please let Jennifer know if you would like to attend. And Dr. Warren?
And Board, just notice that there are 2 annual documents at your seat. Please complete those for the Technology Resources Agreement and the Public Information Form. Make sure you fill that out and leave it at your place, and we'll pick those up for you. And then just a couple of things to put on your calendar. We have the new teacher breakfast scheduled Monday, August the 1st, and that's at 7:30 a.m. We're doing it at Northwest High School this year. And then we're going to try something new at Convocation. We're going to do our morning pep rally. So that'll be Tuesday morning at 8:30 on August the 13th at the stadium. So we're gonna have a very big rah-rah for our 3,000 staff members to get our thing at. And Mrs. Kopp is looking forward to that. Mrs. Kopp, that's all I've got. Yes. Yep.